Alright everyone, welcome along. Tuppence Tuesday, here we are yet again. If you followed on from last week's video, last Friday, looking at something for the weekend, we're starting to look at COVID again. I don't like having to go back. It's not something I want to have to do. We said we're going to have a look at this. If you read the description, we're talking about confirmation is the enemy. It's evil. Now, one of the things about this that I think it's really key that you get and understand is the reality of what bias does and how it actually affects what you do and really what you're thinking as well. Because that's the worst. That's the part that's like most dangerous. So when we looked at this originally, I went through and we talked about it in terms of this photo. So the photo here, this is from Rugby World Cup. Okay, South Africa, the first time South Africa won the Rugby World Cup. And the second time, to be fair as well, was almost just as interesting. It's different. We didn't have this picture. And I think this picture is something that changed a lot of things. And what I wanted people to understand was the bias that went into the picture or that's going on behind the scenes of this picture. Okay. And the request I made back in November when we talked about this was really, what do you think Nelson Mandela had to overcome to kind of shake hands with Francois Pienaar at that point? And equally, and that just as importantly, what biases did Francois Pienaar have to overcome to shake hands? And I think we can both see from like the pride in the expressions on both players, on both parties, that there is something uniting now, that there is a united force there, that something has come together. It's like a little goodness about it. But the point being that bias is key. Now, bias and the way it works is it's the same for all of us, right? Everyone. There's no them and us as far as bias is concerned. Although them and us is what bias is all about, isn't it? Because we do everything right, don't we? And they do everything wrong. It's always them. It's never an us that's wrong, is it? It's a them. They do that. So they always do. We always have to. We have to unpick the mess that they made, right? Why can they not be more like us? It's nice that they try, but they're not quite like us. The bias it's part of everything, and the context that goes with it is there. And it's been described that part of the problem or part of the challenge that we face is that as a human, you are able primarily to cope with managing your family group and protecting your family group. And it becomes our family group against the world. And then as society has progressed, and we're talking thousands of years ago, having villages and cities. Bear in mind, the earliest cities were, gone back to ancient Egypt, and they weren't even the first ones. Right? Wrap your head around this piece of information. So us to ancient Rome is as far back in time as ancient Rome was to ancient Egypt. So like double. It's 4,000 years to ancient Egypt. Okay. And even that wasn't like the beginning of the Egyptian civilization. And that wasn't the first true civilization either. So this isn't something that's new. So don't worry and say, I bias something new. It's terrible. It's not. Okay. We've always had a them and an us culture. And the problem that you face is that how big is the them? So initially it's kind of like, it's like my family. Then it becomes, well, my village. My village. Everyone outside my village, don't like them. In my village, you're all right. Outside, no. Okay. Then my city, or my town, sorry, my city, my country. And we're always looking to have who's inside the group, who's outside the group. And we put outside the group as bad, and everything bad is related to the outside of the group. And what confirmation bias does is where we'll hear stories and we'll overlay context of the stories that supports our perceptions of them and us. Sorry, of them and us. Get it right, Ross. Okay. So we need to be aware of that. And this is a core part of being human. There's nothing wrong with it. This is just part of being human. So simple story. Yeah, and we told this before. Okay. I got lost in a blizzard. It was getting really cold. I thought I was going to die. I didn't know what to do. And I just said to myself, I said, oh God, help us, man. Right. And then all of a sudden, a ranger or somebody like found us and then led us back to the cabin. I was fine. Okay. And if you're religious, you'll be saying, oh, when you pray to God, God has answered you. Of course. If you're not religious, well, you got lucky. Well done. Right? And it's all about the impression that I'm going to overlay on this story based on my beliefs. So if I am a religious person, I will see the hand of God in that case. If I'm not religious at all, then I will see luck. No, why would God listen? Why would your God, a God, listen to you? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, and it would become an argument, a point of argument between the religious person and the atheist. That and the reality is, I'm not in a position to know either way. Really, I think that's the point, and this is why this story is used. It's because it's about faith. So there is no definitive proof either way. It's where your faith sits. But you need to remember this isn't just about items of faith. There are real stories that happen. And we could translate this, we could change this to say, oh, right, when I got the first dose of the vaccine, like against COVID, right, honestly, man, I was sick, like for a day or so afterwards, right? And I was, right? I was, right? My first dose, it was all right for about 12 hours. And then honestly, I was just like, oh, it was wiped us out for like another 12, 20 hours. And I was fine, right? Second dose, not a problem. I know lots of people who had like first dose, no problem. Second dose, oh, I had like similar, like wiped out for 24 hours sort of thing. Sometimes even 2 or 3 days. I've heard that a few times, right? I've heard, oh, I had COVID, I've got this, I've had that, right? The stories that you hear, they're the stories. And the nature of doing these things is when you get told a story, you need to be thinking, is this a story that's a sample in terms of this is just a sample, or is it something that's being used and has been sampled because it helps support a message? So when you're going through and you're taking those decisions about what are you going to do, if you start to replay some of those stories and look at the opposite side, what's the opposite side of this? What's actually being said? What is somebody saying? So what do you reckon then? Okay. Bias and the confirmation bias that surrounds you and is always present. Because so often we talk about them and us, yeah. Us keep getting mixed up, right? And it doesn't matter what it is. You could be like, I'm pro vaccination, they are anti vaccination. I am anti vaccination, they are pro vaccination, right? And as soon as you get that them and us mindset going on, you're shutting down that debate because we are never wrong. Okay. Nobody goes through life believing that they are the bad guy or girl or that they are in the wrong. And that is a fact. Okay. I could turn around and say, I want to hear, tell me I want to know what your opinion is. Okay. And I'm saying, I want to learn. But what I'm not doing is saying, well, I'm wrong. I'm saying, look, I'm not necessarily saying I'm 100% right. It's more likely the way it's going to be replayed in my mind is I can have my opinion changed, I can be converted, or I can relook at data, but it's going to be It's not a, oh, I'm wrong, if that makes sense. Okay. It, as a human being, we just aren't geared up to be in a position saying, I'm wrong. Okay? I'm wrong. I can be persuaded is not an I'm wrong. So what I would say is be prepared to say, I can be persuaded, and look and actively go out of your way to find out and say, right, well, you're saying this. Hmm. Is I don't believe that because, and the impact of long COVID, of not getting a vaccination, of hey, the long-term health impact of being on a ventilator, the PTSD that it can elicit, the nightmares you can have, or the problems you can have around drug dependency, depending on what you have to have. If it's a case that your sedation needs to be, yeah, there are a host of issues that can be brought about by that. And I think the frustration that a lot of people have in the medical profession is around that, you know, we are having, or sorry, in inverted commas, that I'm trying to say what they would say is, well, is that they will say that they are having to harm patients to keep them alive. And it's that level of harm that is unrealistic, given that the fix or the preventative measure that would have saved, alleviated, probably not all of them, let's be honest, it probably wouldn't be all of them, but you know, 90+% of them is if they had a vaccine. And that's the powerful statement that people are trying to say is we're not saying we want you to have a jab because you've got to have a jab. It's you need to get you need to look at the information that's available to you and decide for yourself, definitely, but make that decision based on some real research, not on, oh, well, Steve said, that if you get the injection, right, your arm swells up like that. And then like there was the case on the internet that said that their arm had fallen off and then like they couldn't walk. Okay. It, I don't know if that's true. I don't know if it's false. But what I do know, and just looking at the UK, is that there have been over 50 million vaccine doses given in the UK. Okay. And in terms of the serious side effects, it's not many. Okay. As a percentage of it, it's not even 1%. It's not even 0.1%. Right. You're at, it's way down. It's not something that you want to turn around and say, oh, this is the decision point for me. Because the decision or the issue that we have with something like COVID is even if you are vaccinated. So I'm double vaccinated. I can still get COVID, right? Because I'm double vaccinated, it should be relatively mild for me. It's never a certainty with these things, but it's the risk profile of it way lower. For me, I'm an active person, so that should be fairly low. Risk profile's lower. The risk that I pose to others who aren't vaccinated, though, doesn't change. Okay. And this is the bit that people just can't get their head around is just because you have the vaccine does not mean you cannot be a carrier. So deciding I'm not going to get the vaccine and everyone else around me is going to have the vaccine, I'll be fine. I don't care. Okay? No, because everyone else around you who's got the vaccine can still carry it and pass it on to you. For all they're just, well, fine, mate, it doesn't bother me. Or even worse, asymptomatic, have no symptoms because it doesn't bother them anymore. Okay? And yet that person could devastate your life and your family's life and not know, right? And that's the worst thing. So you need to be, you need to understand the full risk profile of what it is you're doing if you decide not to have the vaccination. As I've said before, there are people out there who genuinely cannot have the vaccine. There are those people. There are people out there as well who, if they get COVID because they can't have the vaccine, it will kill them. Okay. So if we can't get to the point where, as a society, we are saying, I'm going to do everything I can to protect all of us as a society, you know, we're going to have a lot more problems, especially as we go further forward with the way things are with the planet and with the changes that we're going to have to make as a species to carry on surviving. So I hope that wasn't too depressing. Rate and subscribe down below. Right, leave a comment. Let us know how much you're disappointed in me doing this, or selling out, or getting a vaccination, or all that. Right, have a think though. Right, and of course, come back on Friday and we'll talk through the disconnected table piece of the COVID report. And the link to the COVID report is down below. Have a great week. Ta-da.